All right, Module 2, Tutorial D, and this is going to be the day one. We're going to break this up into 2 days. The first one, we're going to build some custom code, and then the second day, we're going to figure out how to use version control with Git and deploy it on GitHub pages. So the first thing you're going to need to do is create a folder to work with, right? So lots of ways you learned in VCD, and by now, hopefully you know how to make a folder on a Mac, right? We can control click and bring up the contextual new folder. We could go up here to File, New Folder. We can hit Command Shift N together and we get our new untitled folder. So now we got to rename it. We don't want to leave it untitled. Now we're going to be making a master detail pattern, but what we don't want to do is name it something like this. Note it's got that space. That is a big no-no for web files. It's also a pain to use uppercase because URLs are case sensitive. So let's make it master-detail all lowercase. From there, we need to open up our development, our editor, right? Our development editor. So on the lab computers is Visual Studio Code, and if you are on your own computer, you can download Visual Studio Code for free. And you've used this in VCD as well. But what we want to do is we want to open the folder context, not just files. So let's go up to File, and we say Open Folder. And let's find our desktop, and what did I just call it? Master Detail Open. There it is. There's absolutely nothing in it right now. We're going to need to put in files. So let's put in our first file. If we look right here at this little icon, it lets us add a file. We say index.html, right? Why index.html? Well, that is going to be, right, our home page of this folder. So if we made another folder and we wanted to point something to it, we could and call that one index.html, but you can only have one index.html per folder, which would be the default it opens when you point to the folder without adding like an HTML into your address bar. So we don't need to put anything in here now, right? What we need to do is actually go back to our desktop and get the download from icon. Put this so you can see what I'm doing. And move it into our master detail folder, right? So we're going to need to take this images, and I'm going to go ahead and move it over into there. I'm copying it with the Option key. You can just move it if you want. We also need this CSV, so let's bring that over there. Everything else just leave for a moment, and we'll mosey back over to VS Code. And so on the left here, right, you'll see this is our project tree, right, kind of everything that's in there. So looking, we have an empty folder of birds, so there's nothing in there yet. We've got food, and we've got some names with JPEGs. We've got thumbnails. There's all the birds with JPEGs. And, of course, our index that has nothing, and then our CSV. So a CSV is a comma separated thing. This is a spreadsheet. This is what a spreadsheet really looks like in the background. If you want to see it a lot prettier, which we will need to do at some point, the best thing is to go ahead and open it up in Excel or Google Drive, whichever is your preferred. And then you can kind of use it as you're used to spreadsheets. But if we look at what we have one row that's the names of the columns, and then each row is an individual bird record. Some things to note, right? For images, most of the images are pointing to Wikipedia, right? So I have the images somewhere else. Where's my browser? There it is, right? So if I put that in, it goes right to that resource. Remember, images are not in the page. They're a different file that has to get called. This one happens to be on wikimedia.org, and I also have grabbed a smaller version, not the full-size version, because that's overkill for bandwidth people, using their devices. What are you doing? No, I don't want anything in there. Yeah, I don't want anything. Why are you changing it to that? Well, then it just crashed. It doesn't matter. We don't need it anyhow. So, oh, it didn't crash. I'm just going to go ahead and quit and say don't save, because I don't know what it's trying to do there. Back to Visual Studio Code. So that's what we have. And so that is setup. So we set up our project folder, but obviously there's no code in it yet. We need to make it actually work. Now we could write all the code ourselves, but we're going to go ahead and let AI write the code. And we're going to be making a master detail pattern. Again, it's good to know terminology, especially when talking to AI, which you could use AI like, hey, I'm thinking of this thing. What am I trying to say here? But we don't want to just go in and tell it, hey, make us a master pattern. We want to go ahead and art direct the entire thing. We're in control. The computer is not in control. So you might want to sketch it out, whether that be on paper, whether that's in your mind's eye. You want to make sure you know what data you have. You can't just go in and tell it to make something. That's just not how it works. So I wrote the prompt for us, and I'm not going to actually have you put this into AI. We're going to go ahead and use the files I create with AI. But let's look at the prompt so you could tell what we're doing here. Let me zoom in a little bit so that this is a little more readable here. Let me just actually go completely full screen here. There we go. Zoom. Close enough. Right? So I'm telling it, I have a spreadsheet of warblers which I'll upload for reference. Why am I going to upload that spreadsheet? Because it's going to see the column names, and that's going to matter for actually helping us to populate this thing. I want to make a master detailed pattern interactive for warblers that can be seen in Iowa, so I'm kind of queuing it to the title. I want to use a CSV to add the data to this page, as I may update it occasionally. Okay, so if I upload the CSV, technically you can't just call a CSV in a web page. You're going to have to use JavaScript to read it and eventually turn it into a JSON object. It very well, whatever AI you're using very well may turn your CSV into a JSON object and embed it in the page, but that's not what we want. We want to control this visualization through our CSV, so if we update the CSV, it goes ahead and makes those changes for us. So we're telling it that we want that CSV to be the data and use an appropriate library to do this, because we know that we can't use we can't just call the CSV. We have to use some code to do that, and it's not that easy. So it's good to use a library for that. Again, these libraries have functionalities that help us out. And then set up this project in a folder that you zip. So we're telling it how to give it to us, like give us multiple files that they zip up into something for us. The default state should, okay, so then again, I come up with exactly what I want. What do I want this to look like? How do I want it to behave? Again, we are not letting AI make the decisions for us. So I say the default state should be square thumbnails of each warbler. So the default state means like the state I see when I first come to this visualization, which we could have something like on the example page, we had a drop down with one of the birds selected. This one's going to be different. We're going to have all the birds presented to us as thumbnail images, and I click on one, and that's how I get to the details. So I'm thinking about responsiveness. On desktop, I want to have 7 birds per row, mobile 5. I'm telling it where to find the thumbnails, so in an images folder, an IMG folder. And also how I used a naming convention, right? How does it know what names of the files to use? Well, I'm going to take every bird name in the column and normalize it, right, for my image name. So I made them all lower, just the way I did the folder name, all lowercase dashes, get rid of any apostrophes. Then I'm starting to talk about behavior here. When I hover over each thumbnail, I should get a tooltip with its name, even though I know it won't work on mobile. When I click on a thumbnail, I want the full view to swap with a single item area, include a back close button. You'll probably also want an escape key, but I think when I just say, hey, make this accessible, it'll probably know to make an escape key. We'll find out. Then I have, so again, what does the detail look like now that I click on a bird? What does that look like? And so I start describing it. I have this horizontal image. I don't want it to be a full width image. I want the name and scientific name to sit next to that image. Well, at least on desktop. I'm sure it's going to have to collapse on mobile. Then, I talk about the information I have. I'm talking about how I want it to lay out. So 3 columns for this one thing on desktop. Then the general information. Again, I'm just art directing everything and telling it anything it needs to do to make my life easier when it comes up. Lastly, we're going to put in citations. And then at the end, I'm like, hey, make it accessible and responsive. I tell it that, hey, we're going to host this on GitHub and place it in tilde and an iframe. make sure it's responsive to whatever width the iframe is. The optimal max width would be 1160. Now here's the thing. This is a certain type of visualization. I'll talk about this later, why we're going to want to use this actually as a hybrid at the end instead of a full iframe hosted. If this was like a map where we want to have it kind of grow to the full height of, it'll fill the full height and width whatever we put the iframe in, that's easier. This is not as good of a choice for an iframe, so I just want to show you that. So that's our prompt. And if you went in and put in that prompt, you would likely get something like in code.zip. So in your icon download folder, unzip code.zip, and you'll see in here we have an indexed, we have a script.js, and we have a styles.cs. So we need to now move, right? Let's open up our master detail folder, right? We want to move, let's move our index into here, and it's going to complain. It's going to say, hey, one already exists, but yes, let's replace it. We want this one. And then we want our two other things to come in here. And now we see we have all this. When we have index, we'll see all the code. And it's not a whole lot of code that it takes to make this, mostly because it's all being kind of templated in the JavaScript file. Okay, great. We have it started up. How do we view it? Well, we could simply come over here and double click on our index and it'll open in a browser, but that is not the good way to do this. We want to, when you just do it as a file, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. What you want to do is use a local server, right? Actually mimic what a web server does, right? When you're working on an interactive project. So how do we do that? Well, we have to use an extension in VS Code. And so we're going to have to install this extension. Probably every time you go to a new lab computer, you're going to have to do this. It's going to be a pain. But if we go up to Code, Preferences, Extensions, and we'll look for one called Live Server, right? And here we got a couple options here. This one's got 80 million. I always, trust things that have lots of users. So we'll just use this one. Hit install. Sometimes you got to restart your browser. I don't think we do, right? We mosey back to index, and down at the bottom right now, you'll see this little go live here. Click to run live server. So that's what we want. We're going to click on that, and there it is. It opens up our web page where we're at, index.html. So let's just learn this. So 127.0.0.1 is your localhost home. It's always going to be that IP address. This is a port, so whatever live server is picking a port number, so you can have multiple live servers that go to this same thing but use a different port number. This is the same as saying localhost.5500, right? So you could use either or. It really doesn't matter. We're here. Okay, so we've got it running. But now we see a problem. First of all, it says the Warbler data could not be loaded. Check that this exists. So our CSV, does it exist? And this is what you have to understand. File path. Now, this is nice. I think the AI put in an error message because usually you won't get an error message like that. So we see here our CSV is just floating in the same folder. Again, we have to be sure we know where the file paths are. Now, we could just simply add a new folder called data and put our CSV there. Let's not do that. Let's look at the code to fix that. So let's go back to our files. Everything's going to be in this script.js. So this is all the JavaScript it wrote. Again, it's not a whole heck of a lot. It wouldn't have been that bad to write this if we had to write this ourselves if you knew JavaScript. But we see here the very first line one, the CSV path, data.warblers. So it's in the same folder. So the same folder just means nothing in front of it, right? If it was like in the root folder, we'd hit /. We don't want that here. We want to just be relative to our file. We could also write /, and that would be the exact same thing as writing nothing. So I just usually don't write anything. I'll hit save, mosey back over. And the good thing about the live servers, anytime anything changes in our folder while it's listening, it will refresh the page and we'll see those changes made. All right, so we got to our project here, except for we still have a problem, right? We don't see our thumbnails. I'm going to click on one. Oh, we do see this set up exactly as I told it to design. We'll go back. Actually, let's click on it. Let's hit escape. Great. It put in escape for accessibility. That's wonderful. But what's going on with these images? Well, I think the easiest way to tell what's going on with an image is to control click on it and say open it in a new tab. And we'll look at it and it says cannot get. So it just means it doesn't exist and it's probably a file path problem. So let's go start looking here. What do you notice? Well, it's that our file is actually called images, not img, right? In my prompt, I accidentally wrote img because a lot of times I just use my image folder as img. Again, I like to just save characters. So our thumbnails are there. So again, let's go start looking in here. So I'm just going to go to Command F and say img to start looking. So this is creating an image. That's not right. Click the next one. Oh, here it is, line 79. The image.source, right? Knowing that an image has an HTML image has a source attribute. So we just need to change this to images. Hit save. Mosey back over to here. And there it is. All of my beautiful warblers that can be seen in Iowa. Right? Great. Append something right in the middle here. I forgot about image optimization. And all these images have been optimized by me, or we're sending them from another website. But let's click on Prothonotary Warbler. Oh no, Prothonotary Warbler's not there. And why is that? Well, that's because if we look at our spreadsheet, it's not just an image file problem. It is that it's looking for this. Well, it is an image file problem. First of all, it's looking for images, birds, .that. Now that is the wrong file to work at. I did a cardinal sin. I went into my original thing. We need to be still in our master details. Nope, where is it? Our master detail thing right here, right? And make sure we have the right one open. Remember, these are not the same file. They're two different places. So first I need to fix this as images and hit save. Now when I come back over, it's still not there. Even though it will, even though it's still looking for it in the right area, and that's because simply we just don't have it, right? There's nothing in our birds images. So I provided for you, now we need to go back to our icon thing, a Prothonotary Warbler image to optimize. Now let's take a look at this. We see that it is 5.6 megabytes. That is way too big to serve, right? There's no reason to serve an image that big. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up in good old Photoshop. And we've got a couple different options here to optimize. Now you saw I was going to look for a JPEG, and so we'll ultimately make a JPEG, but JPEG's no longer the best, and neither is PNG, right? There's a new web format that you should be aware of, and maybe you want to start using it called WebP. And WebP is great because it kind of does everything all the other formats do, but it compresses and makes the file smaller. Now, WordPress still hasn't worked it into its Save for Web dialog, so to do this, you'd actually have to first, right, go ahead and resize your image to what you want. You still don't want to serve your image huge. Let's make our image 960. Let's actually just watch me, and then we'll make the JPEG together. Right, and then you go up to File, Save As. Here we'd put it, whoops, where is it trying to go? We got to put it in the right place, right, which is in our master detail, images, birds. I'm going to put it there even though we technically don't want it there, right? I'm going to go to WebP. I'm going to hit Save. Well, we want to always embed sRGB, right? So let's make sure that's clicked. Hit Save. Now here are WebP options. We can kind of like change how good the file is. We don't really get it. It doesn't seem to give us a preview of that. I'd say 60 is probably good. If you go lossless, the file is going to be bigger. We'll go 60. We'll hit OK. And then if we just mosey over to where we saved it, which was in the regular master, images, birds, Prothonotary Warbler WebP, a beautiful 43 kilobytes. So that's always going to be smaller even than the JPEG. But let's make a JPEG. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop. I'm going to Control Z to get us back to the original size image, right? However big this was, which was going to be 5.6 megabytes. And I'm going to go to File, Export, Save for Web. And now you want to make sure you're in a JPEG. And our quality, let's use 60. Why 60? I just kind of default to 60. I think 60 is like good enough. It's usually clean enough. There's no real major issues, and you save space. Want to make sure we have convert to sRGB, and then let's change our size, right, to the same 960. So now notice our JPEG is going to be 106 kilobytes. So that's still bigger than the WebP, but we will live with it. So let's hit save. It should go to the same spot inside of our birds folder. Hit that. We don't have to do anything. And now when we come back to our Prothonotary warbler, there it is, all fixed. Everything's pretty well done, but we should start checking things, right? Let's not just leave it as is. First thing is we should check its responsiveness. Now we can go ahead and just do that to check it. I prefer to use the Chrome developer tools. Like, I recommend probably using Chrome for development. You can get there by going to View, Developer Tools. I just use the quick keys, Command Option I. Now, when you open this up, you may see it docked to the right. I hate it docked to the right when working responsively because sometimes you need that wide room. So I just go up to these three dots, throw it to the bottom. By default also, it'll probably just kind of fill the area. To make it responsive, there's this little button down here called Toggle Device Toolbar. If I click that, that gives me these little things I can grab and make it wider. I can even make it shorter, higher and shorter, so that I can play with sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring it down to like what's an iPhone type size. And just look like, yeah, this looks great. Now, notice it also acts like a touch device, so there's no hover anymore. But I could click on one, yep, and it still works, and I get my wonderful things, and it did make it nice and neat by doing that. So, yeah, there's everything's looking pretty great. The last thing I think we want to do is start thinking about the design. There's things we might want to do. Now you can use AI and actually art direct it and tell you want things, but again, this costs. There's a cost to using AI to make, especially changes you should learn how to make as some basic coding. One being the environmental cost, two being the cost of just your time for it to respond, three being just that you're not allowed to just. Well, I pay for my AI, so I can probably generate a lot. If you're using free AI, you only get so much generations of code per day before it has to reset. So let's try to change some things. Let's say I want all my text to be sans serif text, right? Something super simple. So let's go look in our styles.css and get rid of that. And so you have to look for where things are. So the default body tag, right, is what's going to set things. And it says the default body tag is just a simple serif keyword. What we want is all paragraphs to be that. So let's add some code. I'll just go right here. Actually, I'm going to go up between these, between the body and the button here. P, curly braces. And inside those curly braces, we want font dash family. Now the nice thing is this autocomplete, right? We can use some of these things, right? And pick some common font families. It's not the only place to get font families, but I'm going to go ahead and just pick Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, hit save. When I come back, right, these are still serifs, but notice the P tags, right, are now, so these must use P tags. These don't use P tags. So you'd have to figure out what they are to fix these, right? So how do you start to figure out what these are in the code? Well, there's a couple ways. One way is you could go looking, and this one's a little complicated because it generates everything in the script. So you kind of got to really know that to figure that out. The easier way, again, is to use our Chrome developer tools. Now there's a better trick than hitting Command Option I when you want to inspect something. If you actually hover over it and control click on it and say inspect, that brings it up, and it brings up what is its code. So we see this is a span that's called chip. It's got a class of chip. You can see what CSS is being applied to it, right? And as CSS is cascading, right? So it is getting the default body serif. That's how it's getting it. If you're really confused how that works, you can go to computed and it'll tell you like, where is it getting its font family from? And I click that and it'll jump right to it and show you. So lots of things we can do here. So if we know that chips should also be sans serif, we'll jump back over here, go back into our styles, and we'll add a comma dot chip, right? So chip was a class name, an HTML attribute of class, and we call a class by putting a dot in front of it. Again, these are some CSS that you just need to learn as you're working with these, and you're just going to learn these things as you go. Again, I highly recommend jumping on W3 Schools for referencing and learning this stuff. I'll hit save. Now when I come back, see my chips are now sans serif, right?
Else we could art direct, because AI is making choices, but you shouldn't just blindly take those choices. You should be the one in control. So obviously, I think I'd probably change some of the text. I'd probably wind up going to sans serif for all this, but let's just see what we got going on here. I'm going to say, I'm going to first look at this. Notice how these are really big, right? And they're kind of fighting our warbler picture here as far as hierarchy. So I want to turn those smaller. So I'm going to go to inspect. I think the best way to look at your code is to do that. And so it gets me the image. I don't want the image. Here's the food item. So we'll see this whole thing is built as a unordered list. So an unordered list, the same thing as a bullet list. You just don't have to have the bullets if you don't want to. It just marks semantically that this is a list of items. There's also an ordered list where you would have like 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C. So we see it's the food list here, the wrapping element, the whole list item that has this thing called CSS grid on it. So if we look here in the code, let me make it a little bigger, right? We see that it's a display of grid. If I turn that off, look, it just becomes stacked. So it's hard, CSS grid is kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it basically is what it sounds like. It makes a grid. The property that we see here is grid template columns. Now that is the one that sets how the grid gets set up. There's also grid row columns. Again, if you really want to learn about it, you want to go to W3 Schools and look at that, or the best use of AI, which would be like explain CSS grid template columns and succinctly, right, and let it go ahead and tell you exactly what it means if you can't wrap your head around what's going on on W3 Schools. So anyhow, let's play with it in the browser here, right? And I say let's go to 3. Oh, that is so much better, right? So that's what I need to change in the code, right? Right now I haven't changed it permanently. That's just me playing with it in the browser, so it goes back when I refresh. So let's mosey back over to VS Code and let's, what did I do there? I don't know what I did there. Okay. I want to show you how to find it. I'm going to hit Command F, right? That's the search function in most software, Command F on a Mac, and look for dot food list, right? That means there's a class on this item. So if we see over here, see a class, and here's that repeat. So I'm going to hit 3, I'm going to hit save, my browser is going to refresh, and now it works. Of course, we should still check it responsively. So I'm going to start shutting down here and just watch what happens. Like, is it getting too small? I'm fine with it. Oh, there was a break. Oh, we see here, now they went back to gigundous. And they're pretty gigundous too. So that tells me there's responsive code, right? So media queries are what do responsive code. And if we look in our search function, we see there's 3 things. So let's jump down to the next one and figure out what's going on. So this is a media query. This is how you write responsive code. This says at media max width 700 pixels. So you could read that as if the browser is 700 pixels, use this code to override this code that isn't wrapped in a media query. Okay, so we see, right, our food list is at 3. Let's change it to 4. We'll hit save. And now we're like, okay, we're back to there's 4 too big. Should we go to 5? I'm going, whoop, and then right there it drops again. So I'm watching my size here. I think I'm okay with 4. It's a little big at this point, but I think I could live with it. But then we get back here and it gets to 2 and it's giant, and pretty much most phones are going to be around this size. So we see another media query for food list right here at 420. It uses this code. I'm going to drop that back to 3. And there it is. I think that's better. We don't need those things to be gigundous. Next thing I'm looking at, and I'm thinking, that's awful big here on desktop. It looks better once we go down more. So what's going on there? Let's inspect it. And we see, okay, let's know the HTML element. This is an H2 with an ID of detail name. And so this is font size. And font size is using this modern way to set fonts for responsive called clamp. And so clamp works that it's a minimum size. It'll never get smaller than this size. A maximum size. It'll never get larger than this size. And then there's this preferred size in the middle when it can be calculated between these sizes. It's a little complicated. Another thing going on here is this idea of rems. So rems is random M units, or not random M units, I'm sorry, relative M units. And I think that's what it stands for. And they're calculated based on your kind of base font size. Generally speaking, the base font size is 16 pixels unless you set it differently. But the nice thing is if we, in Chrome, if we kind of like mouse over it, it gives us a sense of what these sizes are. So this is 32 pixels when it's the smallest. This is 52 pixels at the largest. That's a little big. Let's bring this down. Let's just put it to, ooh, I don't like that. That's still a little too small. How about like 2.5 rem for desktop? Yeah, it gets even, it seems like, does it get bigger there? No, it just stays at that size. That looks pretty good to me. So I just need to go implement the size, right? You can just play with stuff here and then just go implement it in your code. So we see we're going to be looking for bird heading H2 to control that. Even though this has this ID, AI isn't setting it with that ID for some reason. So we need to find this. So I'm just going to copy that, go over here, Command F, look for that, 1 of 1, and that's it. We said, what do we say, 2.5, right? So I'll change that, and that change is made. So looking at what else we have, obviously I would change colors. Well, why don't we change a color? Let's say we wanted to take these headers. These headers are boring, right? Let's give them a color. Now again, you'd want a visual consistency between the rest of your project, so you shouldn't be randomly putting in colors here. You should have like at least a little bit of visual style when you make your full explainer. But let's go look at this and see what it's got here. So H3s, we don't seem to have anything really set for H3s. How many H3s do we have on the page? I'm guessing the only H3s are going to be these general information headings. Actually, here we go. We have general information heading. Let's just try H3. So let's just jump into this. Where am I going to put this? I like to put all my general stuff more up top here, just in case I need to access it. So we'll put it under where we had our P chip thing. So I'm going to say H3, right? And text color is simply color. Now, what color do I want this to be? Well, I'm going to make how do I find a color? That's a good question. I need to go ahead and find a color. I'm going to jump on color.adobe.com. Oh God, why do they always change this on me? Yeah, create a color palette now. I just want a stupid color finder. Is there a color? I don't want to create now a color wheel. Come on, man. All right, I'm just gonna grab this color. Really, this is sometimes the best way to is okay. We're gonna click that color, kind of come back, take a look at it, right? So I like that. That's a good enough color for me. The only concern with color always is your readability contrast on the background. You want to test it for
that, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. Last thing, what if I don't want this? Well, first of all, let's look at this typography here. When it's got a widow, it used to be that we really couldn't do anything about that on the web. Now we have some CSS properties that have come online and that are usable, called text wrap, where we can do some control. It's not perfect. You can't do it over long text. Like I couldn't put it for like the big paragraphs of text. But ooh, do I have it up? I thought I had it up. There's something called text wrap. So I want to take this headline and make sure it's always nice. So here it is. It's intro H1. So I'm going to grab this code. I'm going to come up here, intro H1, and I'm going to add a property, right, and make sure I'm inside my curly braces. Text wrap, and I'm going to say balance, right? How do you know how to use these things? Well, the answer is always, again, like, well, you first of all ask AI and to explain it to you. The other thing you can do is find, let's see if I can find text wrap. Is that in here? It's got to be in here somewhere. Search W3 schools. Word wrap, text wrap, white space. Let's just do it this way. CSS text wrap, right? And so, there it is right there. Word wrap. Why is it in word wrap? Where's text wrap? Oh, maybe there's two things here. I don't even know. No, this is word wrap. I don't know where text wrap is. Anyhow, let's look in this one right here. Text wrap. This one will tell you a little bit about how to do these things. So again, it's like, I don't even know all these things because they change CSS. Well, it's getting more stable, but they implement new things all the time. So what if the rest of my project, nothing else is centered? I want to make this go to the left here. So, well, let's look at what else is put on this. We see that we have this margin, font size, line height. So actually, we don't want to just put it on the H1 because we also want this p tag. So let's go up a level and look at the header with the class of intro. And we see this text align center, right? Text align left. That's great. Except for here's the problem. It doesn't match with this here. So how do we fix that? Let's turn off this margin for a second and see what's going on here. So we see this margin kind of goes here. So there's something about this right here. So margin, this is set with a shorthand property. So that's top, left and right, bottom. But you can set it with a shorthand that uses like a clock, right? So top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so these are just things you need to learn how to do. So I'm going to just first of all put this to 0 to see what happens. Obviously I don't want that. That's setting 0 to all 4 values. So I'm going to say margin right can be 0. Actually, I want this to align here. So what could be going on there? 32 pixels. Now I don't know if that's going to work because see, now it does that there. We'd have to put in responsive code. Again, you'd have to just troubleshoot this. So that's not the best way to do that. I'm going to put 0, 0, 0. Oops, the bottom. I want to get some space between. And I'm going to leave that for now. So the next thing I'm going to do is just play with the max width here, right? So I want the max width to come here, and oh, it's not changing that. So again, we have to figure out what's going on with our thing. So if we see what's going on here, well, that means we're going to have to look at what the code is on this. And so we see a max width of 1040, margin 0 auto. What if we tried adding this to our header intro? So let's go over here. I'm going to paste that in. There it is. Now it matches what's going on. So you just go ahead and use your code that you have elsewhere. So I like this. I'm actually just going to grab all this, copy it, come out to here. Here's intro. So I'm just going to replace this right here, right? That's how I sometimes just write my code like that. And there we have it. It's going to be set up nice and neat, right? So we have our text wrap balance. Great. I actually, it's a little tight right here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add one value to margin and say 32 pixels.
right? And now that gave me that space back. So there it is, right? I've got a nice clean layout. I've done some art directing. I haven't let AI do everything. Now, of course, it still could get better, but for now, that is enough for us to learn some basics of starting to control our code and not letting AI completely do whatever it does.